My parents called my kids second class and moved them to a moldy basement, but they had no idea what I'd already set in motion. I'm Natasha, 35 years old, and mother to the most amazing 10-year-old twins you'll ever meet. After my divorce shattered my world 2 years ago, my parents offered us their home as a lifeline. I thought we were family helping family. Then my golden child brother had a baby, and suddenly my children became invisible, treated like unwanted guests in their own grandparents' house. But what my parents didn't know was that I'd been quietly planning our escape for months. When they finally crossed the line that October afternoon, moving my kids to an unsafe basement to make room for their precious grandson, I simply smiled and said 3 words that changed everything forever. What happened next will shock you, because sometimes the best revenge is proving just how wrong people are about your strength. The story I'm about to tell you began long before that devastating October day when my world shifted forever. To understand how we got there, I need to take you back to where it all started, a seemingly innocent divorce that would unravel every assumption my family had about who I was and what I was capable of. When my husband Derek and I separated after 12 years of marriage, the ground beneath my feet disappeared entirely. We had built our entire existence around his career as a software developer, while I worked part-time as a pediatric nurse to accommodate our twin schedules. The divorce papers didn't just end a marriage, they obliterated the financial foundation I thought was secure forever. Suddenly, I found myself with shared custody, minimal alimony that barely covered groceries, and the terrifying reality that I needed to work full-time to support myself and my children. The twins, Oliver and Sophie, were only 8 then, and they were struggling to understand why Daddy didn't live with us anymore and why Mommy cried so much behind closed doors. My parents, Margaret and Robert, lived in a spacious colonial house in Millbrook, just 20 minutes from the children's hospital where I worked. When they offered us their home as a temporary solution, it felt like divine intervention. "Just until you get back on your feet," my father had said, his hand heavy on my shoulder as we stood in their pristine foyer surrounded by my hastily packed boxes. Family takes care of family. I was grateful beyond words, despite the complicated history that had always defined my relationship with them. Growing up, I had been the responsible child, the one who followed every rule, met every expectation, and never caused a moment's trouble. My younger brother Harrison, on the other hand, had always been the golden child who could do absolutely no wrong. While I spent 8 grueling years putting myself through nursing school, specializing in pediatric care because I genuinely loved working with children, Harrison dropped out of college after 2 semesters to start some vague tech venture. My parents funded his business dreams without hesitation, and now, at 32, he was pulling in 6 figures while I was starting over from scratch. The pattern of favoritism was so deeply ingrained in our family dynamic that I had stopped noticing it years ago. It was just the way things were. Harrison was special, and I was dependable. Oliver and Sophie were remarkable children, each with personalities that never failed to amaze me. Oliver was our little artist, always drawing elaborate fantasy worlds or building impossible structures with whatever materials he could find. His sensitivity sometimes made navigating life challenging for him, but it also gave him an empathy that was rare in someone so young. Sophie was our athlete and advocate, fierce and confident, always the first to speak up when she witnessed something unfair. She had inherited my stubborn streak and Derek's quick wit, a combination that both thrilled and terrified me. Despite the upheaval of the divorce and our move, both children were adjusting remarkably well. Their grades remained solid, they had made friends in their new school, and they seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with their grandparents. Our initial living arrangement felt sustainable and even comforting. My parents converted their home office into a cheerful bedroom for the twins, complete with bunk beds and colorful curtains. I took over the guest room, which felt like luxury after the cramped apartment Derek and I had been considering during our separation negotiations. I contributed what I could to household expenses, did most of the cooking since I genuinely enjoyed it, and made sure Oliver and Sophie were respectful of their grandparents' space and routines. When I worked my 12-hour shifts at the hospital, sometimes including overnight rotations, my parents helped with school pickups and homework supervision. The plan was simple: save enough money for a security deposit and first month's rent on our own place within a year. I was methodical about it, picking up extra shifts whenever possible and putting aside every dollar I could spare. The housing market in our area was expensive, but I was determined to give my children the stability they deserved. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought we were building toward something better. Then Harrison and his wife Vivian had their baby, little Camden, and the entire foundation of our family shifted overnight. My parents had always favored Harrison, but their reaction to his firstborn was something I had never witnessed before. Within days of Camden's birth, they had transformed their formal dining room into an elaborate nursery, complete with a crib that cost more than my monthly salary, despite the fact that Harrison and Vivian owned a 4-bedroom house less than 10 miles away. They purchased expensive baby equipment that would only be used during visits, a high-tech changing station, a specialized rocking chair, even a professional-grade baby monitor system. My mother started cancelling any plans to help with Oliver and Sophie the moment Harrison called with the slightest need. "Your brother needs more support right now," she would explain when I asked why she couldn't pick up the twins from their after-school program. "He's new to parenting." The irony that I had been a single parent managing everything alone for over a year somehow escaped her entirely. At first, I tried to be understanding. New babies were exciting, and this was their first grandson. Oliver and Sophie had been their only grandchildren for 10 years, so perhaps they were simply enjoying the novelty of a tiny baby in the house again. I encouraged my children to be patient and kind, explaining that little Camden needed extra attention because he was so small and helpless. "Grandma and Grandpa are just excited," I would tell them when they asked why they couldn't play in the living room anymore because the baby was sleeping. The favoritism started subtly, in ways that were easy to dismiss as coincidence or overthinking. Christmas gifts that were noticeably more expensive for Camden than for my children. Comments about how Camden looked exactly like Harrison had as a baby, while Oliver and Sophie had always been said to resemble their father's side of the family more than mine. Small things, perhaps, but they accumulated like drops of water slowly filling a bucket. I tried to compensate by creating special time just for us. We would go to the park on my days off, have movie nights in my bedroom with popcorn and hot chocolate, or take weekend trips to the Children's Museum downtown. I started a savings chart taped to my bathroom mirror where the kids could see our progress toward getting our own place. "Just a few more months," I would promise them as we colored in another square representing another $100 saved. "We'll have our own home by Christmas." But as spring melted into summer, the tension in the house grew thicker with each passing week. My parents became increasingly critical of every parenting decision I made, from what I fed the twins to their bedtimes to how much screen time they were allowed. Meanwhile, Harrison and Vivian could do absolutely nothing wrong with Camden, even when they showed up hours late for family dinners or cancelled plans at the last minute because the baby was having a difficult day. I found myself walking an impossible tightrope, trying to shield my children from the growing reality that their grandparents were treating them differently while also trying to maintain peace in a household where I desperately needed help. I couldn't afford childcare on top of saving for our move, and my parents' assistance with pickups and homework supervision was the only thing making my work schedule possible. By the end of summer, my savings account was growing steadily, and I had calculated that by November, I would have enough for a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a decent school district. Just 3 more months of patience, I told myself. 3 more months of biting my tongue when my mother dismissed Oliver's excitement about making the school art show. 3 more months of watching my parents fawn over Camden while barely acknowledging Sophie's achievement of making the advanced soccer team. I had no idea how much worse things would become before those 3 months were up. The situation escalated dramatically on a Tuesday in September when Harrison called what he pompously referred to as a family meeting. He and Vivian sat at my parents' kitchen table with baby Camden, who was dressed in an outfit that probably cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget. "We've got some exciting news," Harrison announced, his attention focused entirely on our parents rather than acknowledging my presence. "We're finally doing that major renovation on our house, the one we've been talking about for ages." My mother clasped her hands together with genuine delight. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You've been planning that kitchen remodel for so long." "The thing is," Vivian continued, bouncing Camden on her knee in a way that struck me as performative, "we'll need somewhere to stay during the construction. It should only be about 6 to 8 weeks, according to our contractor." Before I could even process what was happening, my father was nodding enthusiastically. "You'll stay here, of course. We have plenty of room." I cleared my throat carefully. "Actually, we're already pretty tight on space with the 5 of us." I gestured to myself, the twins, and my parents. "Maybe we could help you find a nice extended stay hotel. I'd be happy to research options in your price range." My mother shot me a look that could have frozen fire. "Family helps family, Natasha. It's only temporary." And just like that, the decision was made. No one asked how I felt about it. No one considered what this would mean for Oliver and Sophie. No one acknowledged that I had been told the exact same thing about our temporary stay, which was now approaching the 2-year mark. Harrison and Vivian moved in the following weekend, and the changes were immediate and jarring. My father helped them set up a portable crib in their room for Camden, though he had never once offered to help assemble the twins' bunk beds when we first arrived. My mother cleared out an entire walk-in closet for Vivian's extensive wardrobe, while my belongings had remained in suitcases for months before I finally bought a small dresser from a thrift store. Suddenly, Oliver and Sophie were constantly being told to keep their voices down throughout the day because Camden is napping. Their toys, which had been limited to their bedroom and a small corner of the living room, were now considered clutter and repeatedly gathered into boxes that were stored in the basement. The television, which they had been allowed to watch for 1 hour after completing their homework, was now perpetually tuned to whatever shows Vivian wanted to watch during Camden's feeding times. When I came home from a particularly exhausting shift one evening, I found Sophie sitting alone on the back porch, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, settling beside her on the weathered wooden steps. "Grandma said I was being too loud with my jump rope in the backyard," she sniffled. But Camden wasn't even sleeping. He was in the living room with Aunt Vivian, playing with his toys. She just didn't want to hear me counting my jumps for the school fitness challenge. That same week, Oliver came home from school practically vibrating with excitement about an art project he had been working on. He had been selected to represent his class in a district-wide exhibition, a huge honor that he had been hoping for all semester. When he tried to show my mother his winning piece, a detailed drawing of our neighborhood from a bird's-eye view, she waved him away without even looking up from the baby clothes she was folding. "Not now, Oliver. I'm helping Aunt Vivian organize Camden's wardrobe." I watched my son's face crumple before he carefully composed himself, and something inside my chest hardened like cooling steel. That night, after the children were asleep, I tried to have a careful conversation with my parents about what I was observing. "I understand that Harrison and his family need help right now," I began, choosing my words with surgical precision. "But I'm concerned about how Oliver and Sophie are being treated. They're starting to feel like they're not important anymore." My father frowned, his expression suggesting I was being deliberately difficult. "They're being oversensitive. Children need to learn that babies require more attention." "Camden isn't even here most of the day," I pointed out. "Harrison takes him to daycare before work, and Vivian picks him up on her way home. Oliver and Sophie aren't asking for attention during those hours, they're asking to exist normally in their temporary home." My mother sighed dramatically, as if I were a particularly exhausting student. "You always were jealous of your brother, Natasha. I thought you would have outgrown that by now." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Was that really how they saw me? As a jealous sibling rather than a concerned mother protecting her children? The situation continued to deteriorate week by week. Vivian began rearranging items in the kitchen without asking, complaining about the unhealthy snacks I bought for the twins while simultaneously leaving her pump parts soaking in the sink for days. Harrison acted as if he owned the house, inviting friends over for loud watch parties without checking if anyone else had plans to use the living room. One evening, I overheard Harrison and my father discussing financial matters while I was cleaning up after dinner. "We might need to extend the renovation timeline," Harrison was saying. "The contractor found some structural issues with the foundation that we didn't anticipate." "Stay as long as you need," my father replied warmly. "This is your home too, son." I thought about how I had never been told that, despite contributing to household expenses and doing most of the cooking and cleaning. Instead, I was regularly reminded that their help was temporary and conditional. The breaking point came during a Sunday dinner in early October. My mother had prepared all of Harrison's favorite foods: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, none of which my children particularly enjoyed. When Oliver politely asked if there was anything else he could eat, perhaps just a sandwich, my mother's response was swift and cutting. "When I was growing up, we ate what was put in front of us," she said sternly. "Children today are far too picky." Later in the same meal, Camden threw his entire plate of pured vegetables on the floor, splattering orange mess across the dining room. Everyone laughed indulgently. "He's just exploring his world," Vivian explained with a fond smile, making no move to clean up the mess. "The pediatric Ian says this is completely normal developmental behavior." The double standard was so blatant that even my usually diplomatic son noticed. "How come Camden can throw food, but I can't ask for a sandwich?" he whispered to me, his voice barely audible. I had no good answer for him. That week, I discovered that someone had removed Oliver and Sophie's artwork from the refrigerator to make room for a printout of Camden's daycare schedule and several professional photos from his recent baby photo shoot. When I asked about it, Vivian said she needed the information front and center and didn't think anyone would mind if she rearranged a few things. The twins began retreating to their small shared bedroom, the only space where they had any control over their environment. I started taking them to the public library after school whenever I wasn't working, just to give them somewhere they could exist without being constantly shushed or criticized. During a particularly difficult shift at the hospital, my co-worker Rebecca noticed my obvious stress as we chatted together in the break room. "Everything okay at home?" she asked gently. I found myself pouring out the entire situation: the favoritism, the impossible living conditions, the way my children were being treated like inconveniences in their own temporary home. Rebecca listened sympathetically before saying something that would stick with me for weeks afterward. "It sounds like your parents have created a household where your brother's family is treated as honored guests, while you and your children are treated as unwelcome roommates," she observed. "That's not a healthy environment for anyone, especially growing children." She was absolutely right. Hearing it stated so clearly made me realize how normalized the dysfunction had become in my daily life. That evening, instead of going straight home after my shift, I drove around our neighborhood for an hour, thinking and planning. Finally, I called my realtor friend Jessica, someone I had worked with years ago when Derek and I bought our first house. "I need to get my kids out of this situation," I told her honestly. "Sooner rather than later." By mid-October, the situation at home had deteriorated beyond what I thought was humanly possible. Harrison and Vivian had completely taken over the house with my parents' enthusiastic encouragement. Their renovation, originally scheduled for 6 to 8 weeks, had now been extended indefinitely due to complications that Harrison was mysteriously vague about whenever I asked for details. I came home one afternoon to find that my parents had purchased a specialized high chair for Camden, one that cost nearly $400, according to the box I found in the recycling bin. This was the same week they had complained about the cost of Oliver's asthma medication, which my insurance only partially covered. "We want Camden to be comfortable when he eats here," my mother explained when I questioned the expense. "Oliver needs to breathe," I responded, unable to keep the edge from my voice. My mother looked at me as if I were being completely unreasonable. "Your father and I are on a fixed income, Natasha. We can't be expected to cover everything for your children." The fact that I paid for all of my children's expenses, plus contributed to household bills, apparently didn't register with her. Neither did the fact that Harrison and Vivian, both high earners, contributed absolutely nothing toward household expenses during their extended stay. The next incident occurred when Sophie was practicing her clarinet for band class. She had been playing for less than 15 minutes when Vivian stormed into the living room. "Can you not do that right now? Camden is trying to nap, and I have an important conference call in 10 minutes. Sophie immediately apologized and put her instrument away, but later she told me tearfully that she had been practicing at the exact time her band teacher had scheduled for virtual practice sessions. She had now missed it and would be unprepared for her upcoming evaluation. I tried to speak with Vivian about working out a schedule that could accommodate everyone's needs. "My work calls and Camden's sleep schedule have to take priority," she responded dismissively. Sophie can practice her little hobby anytime. I bit my tongue to avoid saying something I would regret, but Emma's little hobby was something she was genuinely passionate about. Her band teacher had even noted that she showed real musical talent. In this household, however, anything my children did was considered less important than the most trivial needs of Harrison's family. Oliver was struggling academically for the first time in his life. His teacher sent me a concerned email about his withdrawal in class and declining participation in group activities. My sociable, enthusiastic son had become quiet and anxious, jumping at loud noises and constantly looking over his shoulder. When I asked him about it during one of our bedtime talks, he admitted he was having trouble sleeping because he was worried about doing anything wrong at home. Grandma and Grandpa get mad at us for everything, he explained in a small voice. But they never get mad at Camden or Uncle Harrison or Aunt Vivian, even when they're really loud or messy. I started taking extra shifts at the hospital, partly to earn more money for our inevitable escape and partly to avoid the suffocating tension at home. My parents interpreted this as me shirking family responsibilities, while Harrison and Vivian seemed pleased to have me out of the way more often. The final confrontation came during a family dinner in late October. My parents had invited several extended family members over, including my Aunt Patricia, who had always been kind to me and my children. During the meal, my mother launched into an extended monologue about how extraordinarily gifted Camden was, how at just 9 months old, he was clearly advanced for his age. He's trying to pull himself up to standing already, she boasted to the table. Harrison was an early walker too. Some children just have that natural athletic ability. She then turned to Oliver and added, with casual cruelty that took my breath away, "It's too bad you didn't inherit that from your father's side. Derek was always so athletic, wasn't he?" I watched my son's face crumple before he carefully composed himself, and in that moment, I knew we were done. The implication was crystal clear. Any positive traits my children possessed came from their father or existed despite my inferior influence, while Camden's gifts were obviously inherited from the superior genetic line of my brother. Aunt Patricia caught my eye across the table, her expression deeply concerned. After dinner, she pulled me aside into the hallway. "How long has it been like this?" she asked quietly. "It's always been this way to some degree," I admitted. "But it's gotten exponentially worse since Harrison's family moved in." "This isn't healthy for your children, Natasha," she said, echoing what Rebecca from work had told me. "They deserve better than being treated as second-class members of their own family." I nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "I'm working on it," I assured her. "I have a plan." And I did. In the weeks since my conversation with Rebecca, I had been meeting with Jessica during my lunch breaks whenever possible. We had looked at several rental properties, and I had found a small 3-bedroom house just 15 minutes from the hospital and within the same school district where the twins were thriving academically. The rent was at the absolute upper limit of what I could afford, but I had been approved based on my steady employment history and excellent credit score. I had signed the lease the previous week but told no one, not even Oliver and Sophie. I didn't want to get their hopes up until everything was completely finalized. The house would be available for move-in on November 1st, just over a week away. I had been secretly ordering essential furniture to be delivered on that date and had already set up utilities in my name. Aunt Patricia squeezed my hand. "Let me know if you need anything," she said. "I've been concerned about this situation for quite some time." Her support meant more than she could possibly know. I had begun to question my own perceptions, wondering if I was being oversensitive or unreasonably jealous as my parents constantly suggested. Having outside confirmation that the situation was as bad as I thought gave me the final push of confidence I needed. The next morning, I overheard Harrison and my father discussing even more permanent arrangements while I was getting coffee before my shift. "The contractor says it could be another 3 months minimum," Harrison was saying. "And honestly, with the baby, it might make more sense to just stay through the holidays. The stress of moving with an infant during winter." "You know you're always welcome here," my father replied warmly. "This is your home, son." I wondered if either of them remembered that I had been told my stay was temporary, that I was expected to find my own place as quickly as possible. The double standard was so glaring it would have been laughable if it weren't breaking my children's hearts daily. That evening, I took the twins out for ice cream after dinner, something we rarely did on weeknights. I wanted some private time with them, away from the suffocating atmosphere of the house. "I need you both to know something important," I told them as they enjoyed their treats in our favorite corner booth. "No matter what Grandma and Grandpa say or do, you two are amazing, valuable people. The way they've been treating you isn't because of anything you've done wrong." Sophie, always perceptive beyond her years, studied my face carefully. "Are we going to move out soon?" I was surprised by her insight. "What makes you ask that?" "You've been working a lot more shifts," she observed. "And you seem different lately, less sad and more determined." Out of the mouths of babes. My daughter had seen the change in me before I had fully acknowledged it myself. "Just keep being your wonderful selves for a little bit longer," I told them, not quite ready to reveal my complete plan. "Can you do that for me?" They both nodded solemnly, and I saw a flicker of hope in their eyes that had been missing for far too long. When we returned home, Vivian was complaining loudly about the twins' backpacks being in the hallway, despite the fact that Camden's stroller, diaper bag, and various toys were scattered throughout every common area of the house. "Children need to learn to pick up after themselves," she lectured me as if she were the parenting expert and I were a complete novice. I smiled tightly and helped the kids move their belongings, reminding myself that we only had to endure this toxic environment for a few more days. I had no idea that the situation was about to explode in a way that would force my hand even sooner than I had planned. The following Tuesday, I was scheduled for a 12-hour shift at the hospital. It was a particularly chaotic day in the pediatric ward, with 3 new admissions and a staffing shortage that had me covering more patients than was safe or reasonable. I barely had time to check my phone during my abbreviated lunch break, but when I did, I saw several increasingly frantic messages from both Oliver and Sophie. From Oliver: "Mom, something weird is happening. Grandpa and Uncle Harrison are moving our stuff." From Sophie: "Grandma says we have to move to the basement. This isn't fair." From Oliver: "Mom, please come home. They took all our things downstairs." From Sophie: "I hate it here. The basement is cold and gross and there are spiders everywhere." My heart pounded as I immediately called home. No answer. I tried both children's phones. Still no answer. Finally, I texted Sophie: "I'll be home as soon as I can. Stay calm. I love you both." I spoke with my supervisor, explaining the family emergency. She was understanding and arranged coverage for my remaining 4 hours, but even so, it took me another hour to properly hand off my patients and complete critical documentation before I could leave. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Had my parents really moved my children to the basement, the unfinished, poorly insulated basement that had occasional water seepage when it rained heavily? When I pulled into the driveway, I took a deep breath, trying to center myself before going inside. I needed to assess the situation clearly before reacting emotionally. The scene that greeted me confirmed my worst fears and then some. Oliver and Sophie sat huddled together on the living room couch, both with red-rimmed eyes and the shell-shocked expressions of children who had been fundamentally betrayed. My mother was in the kitchen with Vivian, both drinking tea and chatting casually as if nothing unusual had happened. Harrison and my father were nowhere to be seen. "What's going on?" I asked, going straight to my children. Sophie jumped up and threw her arms around me. "They moved all our stuff to the basement without asking us," she said, her voice muffled against my shirt. "They said we don't deserve the good rooms upstairs." Oliver nodded miserably. "Grandpa said Uncle Harrison's family needs more space because they're more important right now." I hugged them both tightly, my anger building like a volcanic eruption, but I kept my voice calm and steady for their sake. "Let me talk to Grandma and see what's happening," I said. In the kitchen, my mother barely looked up when I entered. "You're home early," she observed with mild interest. "Why are my children's belongings in the basement?" I asked directly, skipping any pretense of pleasantries. Vivian sipped her tea delicately. "We needed to make some adjustments to the living arrangements. Harrison and I need a proper nursery for Camden, Plus I need space for my home office now that my company has gone permanently remote. So you decided to move Oliver and Sophie to the unfinished basement without discussing it with me first? My voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that precedes a storm. My mother finally met my eyes. It was the most logical solution. The children are older and can adapt more easily than a baby. Besides, our other grandson deserves the best rooms. He's here all day while your children are at school. The casual cruelty of her statement took my breath away completely. My children deserve a safe, comfortable space just as much as Camden does, I said. Don't be so dramatic, Natasha, my mother dismissed with a wave of her hand. The basement is perfectly fine. We put their beds down there and everything. The basement has visible mold in one corner, gets freezing cold at night, and the ceiling is unfinished, I pointed out. Not to mention there's only one small window that doesn't even open properly for emergency egress. They'll manage, my mother said with finality. Family means making sacrifices. Apparently, in her mind, family only meant my children should sacrifice, never Harrison's. At that moment, my father and Harrison came in through the back door, both looking pleased with themselves. Oh good, you're home, my father said when he saw me. We've made some changes that we need to discuss with you. Yes, I can see that, I replied, fighting to keep my tone level. You moved my children's belongings to the basement without my permission. Harrison shrugged as if we were discussing the weather. We need the space upstairs. Camden is getting more mobile and needs room to develop properly. Plus, Vivian needs a quiet space for her important work calls. And my children need a safe, appropriate bedroom, I countered. The basement is fine, my father said dismissively. I put in some extra lighting and laid down some old carpet remnants. They should be grateful they have a place to stay at all. I stared at him, truly seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. This man who had raised me, whom I had spent decades trying to please, had just revealed exactly how little he valued me and my children. Oliver has asthma, I reminded them. The basement is damp and has visible mold. It could trigger a serious respiratory attack. You're overreacting as usual, Harrison said with an eye roll. Kids are resilient. Vivian and I grew up in much worse conditions, didn't we, honey? Vivian nodded in agreement, though I happened to know she had grown up in a 5-bedroom house in one of the most affluent suburbs in the state. I looked around at the 4 adults who had made this decision without consulting me. None of them showed even a hint of remorse or understanding. To them, this was perfectly reasonable. The golden child's family deserved the best accommodations, while my children deserved whatever scraps were left over. I walked back to the living room where Oliver and Sophie waited anxiously. They looked up at me with such trust, such hope that I would fix this impossible situation. In that moment, something crystallized within me, a calm certainty about what needed to happen next. I smiled at them, a genuine smile despite the circumstances, and said 3 words that would change everything. Pack your bags. They looked confused, but I nodded encouragingly. Trust me, I said. Pack everything important to you. We'll come back for the rest later. My father had followed me into the living room and overheard. Oh, for heaven's sake, Natasha. Stop being so dramatic. No one is asking you to leave. I turned to him, still smiling calmly. No, Dad. You just made it abundantly clear where my children and I stand in this family hierarchy, and we deserve so much better than this. What are you talking about? My father sputtered as Oliver and Sophie looked between us with wide, uncertain eyes. Go on, kids, I said gently. Go pack your backpacks with your most important things. We'll come back for everything else tomorrow. As they hurried upstairs, my mother entered the living room with obvious agitation. What nonsense is this now? You can't just leave because things didn't go exactly your way. Harrison and Vivian followed, with Camden perched on Harrison's hip. The entire family was here for this final showdown. This isn't about things not going my way, I explained with supernatural calm. This is about basic respect and consideration, which has been completely absent from this household for months. We've given you a roof over your head for nearly 2 years, my father exclaimed. How dare you talk about lack of consideration? Yes, you have, I acknowledged. And I've been genuinely grateful. I've also contributed financially, done most of the cooking and cleaning, and made sure my children respected your rules and space. But today you crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Vivian scoffed. It's just a bedroom rearrangement. You're being ridiculously oversensitive. I turned to her with laser focus. Is that what you would call it if someone moved your child to an unsuitable space without consulting you first? She had no answer for that. The basement is perfectly adequate, my mother insisted. We raised you and Harrison without all these special accommodations children seem to need nowadays. The basement has mold, I repeated patiently. Oliver has asthma. It's also cold, damp, and has inadequate emergency exits. It's not a legal bedroom by any housing code standard. My father waved his hand dismissively. Those codes are just government overreach. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Safety regulations were suddenly government overreach when they inconvenienced him, but I suspected he would feel very differently if he were the one being relegated to substandard accommodations. Where exactly do you think you're going to go? Harrison asked with a smirk. It's not like you've been saving much with your spending habits. And there it was, the fundamental misunderstanding they all shared. They saw me as financially dependent and irresponsible, despite all evidence to the contrary. They truly believed I had no options, no agency, no ability to stand independently. That's where you're wrong, I said quietly. I've been saving systematically since the day I moved in here. I've been working extra shifts and building my emergency fund methodically. And 3 weeks ago, I signed a lease on a house not far from here. The stunned silence that followed was deeply, profoundly satisfying. My mother recovered first. You were planning to leave without telling us? She asked, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. I was planning to give you proper notice next week, I clarified. The house isn't available until November 1st, but today's events have significantly accelerated my timeline. You can't be serious, Harrison said, finally realizing this was actually happening. Where are you going to stay until then? That's no longer any of your concern, I replied. In truth, I had already spoken with Rebecca from work, who had offered her guest room for a few days if needed. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by sneaking around behind our backs and then storming out over a minor disagreement. Minor disagreement? I repeated incredulously. You moved my children's belongings to an unsafe space without my knowledge or consent. You told them to their faces that they don't deserve the same comfort and consideration as their cousin. That's not minor, Dad. That's a fundamental statement about how you value them and me. Oliver and Sophie came back downstairs, each carrying a backpack and a small duffel bag. Sophie was clutching her clarinet case, and Oliver had his favorite art supplies and the stuffed elephant he'd slept with since he was 3. We're ready, Mom, Sophie said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. This is ridiculous, my mother declared. You can't seriously be leaving right now. We are, I confirmed. We'll come back tomorrow to get the rest of our things when everyone has had a chance to process this. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back with open arms, my father threatened. I looked at him with genuine sadness. I stopped expecting that a long time ago, Dad. Harrison stepped forward, suddenly realizing this was actually happening. Come on, sis. Let's talk about this rationally. There's no need to make a scene in front of the kids. My children have already been shown exactly where they stand in this family's hierarchy, I responded. There's nothing left to discuss tonight. I helped Oliver and Sophie load their bags into my car while my family watched from the front porch, their expressions ranging from anger to complete disbelief. They had been so certain of their power over me, so confident in my dependence, that they couldn't process the reality of my departure. As I started the car, my mother rushed over to my window. Natasha, please, you're overreacting. Come back inside and we'll figure something out. We'll talk tomorrow when I come to get our things, I said firmly. But where will you go? She asked, genuine concern finally breaking through her indignation. "Somewhere where my children are valued," I answered simply, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see Oliver and Sophie looking back at the house that had been our home for nearly 2 years. Not with sadness, I realized, but with unmistakable relief. "Are we really moving to our own house?" Oliver asked cautiously. "Almost," I told him. "We have a house waiting for us, but we can't move in until next week. Tonight, we're going to stay with my friend Rebecca from work." "Is it because of what Grandpa and Grandma did?" Sophie asked. I chose my words carefully. "It's because we deserve to live somewhere where everyone is treated with respect and kindness. I've been planning for us to move out for a while now, but yes, what happened today made me realize we needed to leave immediately." "I didn't like how they talked about us," Oliver said quietly. "Like we weren't important." My heart ached at his words. "You are both incredibly important," I assured them. "And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to have you in their lives." When we arrived at Rebecca's house, she welcomed us warmly. She had already prepared her guest room with an air mattress for the children alongside the queen bed I would use. She had even bought ice cream and rented a family movie for us to watch together. As the twins settled in, picking at their ice cream with subdued enthusiasm, Rebecca pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "It takes real courage to set boundaries with family." "I just wish I had done it sooner," I admitted. "Before they hurt my kids like this." "You're doing it now," she pointed out. "And that's what matters." That night, as Oliver and Sophie slept peacefully beside me in the unfamiliar room, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Sadness for what should have been, anger at how we'd been treated, anxiety about the future, but underneath it all, a powerful sense of peace. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself and my children without wavering or second-guessing my instincts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, retrieving our belongings, weathering the inevitable emotional manipulation, finalizing arrangements for our new home. But tonight, watching my children sleep peacefully, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right decision. We were finally breaking free from a toxic situation that had been slowly poisoning our family bonds. The next morning, I called in to use a personal day at work. Rebecca offered to let the twins stay with her while I went back to collect our belongings, but I declined. "They need to see this through," I explained. "It's important for them to know we're doing this together as a family." We arrived at my parents' house at 10 in the morning, when I knew everyone would be home and we could handle this situation efficiently. My father answered the door with a scowl that softened slightly when he saw the twins beside me. "Come to apologize for your tantrum?" he asked me directly. "No," I replied evenly. "We've come to get our things." His face hardened again. "Your mother has been upset all night because of your dramatic exit." "I'm sorry she's upset," I said, and I genuinely meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want to hurt my parents unnecessarily. "But we're still moving out." He stepped aside reluctantly to let us enter. My mother was sitting in the living room, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep. Harrison and Vivian were conspicuously absent. "Where are Harrison and Vivian?" I asked. "They took Camden to the park," my mother replied. "They thought it would be less stressful if they weren't here while you collected your things." At least they had shown that much consideration. "Oliver, Sophie, go pack up your room," I instructed. "Remember what we talked about in the car. Just pack what you need and love. We can replace everything else." As they headed upstairs, my mother turned to me with wounded eyes. "I can't believe you're actually doing this to us." "I'm not doing anything to you," I corrected her. "I'm doing something for my children and myself." "We've given you everything," she insisted. "A place to stay when you had nowhere to go, help with the children, emotional support during your divorce." "And I've been grateful," I acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean my children should be treated as less valuable than Camden." "We never said that," she protested. "You didn't have to say it explicitly. Your actions made it perfectly clear." My father joined us, pacing the room with agitation. "This is about Harrison, isn't it? You've always been jealous of him." I shook my head firmly. "This isn't about Harrison. This is about Oliver and Sophie being moved to an unsafe basement without my knowledge or consent. This is about you explicitly stating that Camden deserves the better rooms simply because he's Harrison's son. You're twisting our words, my mother accused. Am I? I challenged. You said, and I quote, our other grandson deserves the best rooms. What exactly did you mean by that, if not that my children deserve less? She had no answer for that. I went upstairs to help the twins pack their belongings. Most of their clothes fit into the large suitcases I had brought. Oliver carefully wrapped his favorite books and the science kit he'd received for his birthday. Sophie packed her sports equipment and the jewelry box her father had given her last Christmas. When we came back downstairs with the first load, my father was waiting by the door. Where exactly are you going? He demanded. This mysterious house you claim to have rented. We're staying with a friend until our house is ready next week, I explained, though I didn't owe him this information. And how exactly do you plan to afford rent on a nurse's salary? He asked skeptically. The condescension in his tone made something snap inside me. I put down the bags I was carrying and faced him directly. Dad, I make $68,000 a year as a pediatric nurse. I have excellent credit, minimal debt, and I've been saving systematically for nearly 2 years. I'm fully capable of providing for my family without your assistance. He looked genuinely surprised, and it occurred to me that he had no real idea what I earned or how I managed my finances. He had simply assumed I was struggling financially because that narrative fit his preconceptions about me. The rental market is extremely competitive right now, my mother interjected. How did you even find a place? I've been looking methodically for months, I said. I have professional connections and references. Just because I didn't share my plans with you doesn't mean I didn't have them. We made several trips to load everything into my car. My parents watched silently, the reality of our departure finally sinking in completely. When we had packed everything we wanted to take immediately, I did one final walkthrough to ensure we hadn't forgotten anything critical. In the kitchen, I found my mother making coffee, her movements mechanical and distant. We're heading out now, I told her. She turned to me, eyes welling with fresh tears. I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family. Yes, we are, I agreed. And that's exactly why this hurts so much. Family should make each other feel valued and respected. Oliver and Sophie haven't felt that here for a very long time. That's not true, she protested weakly. Mom, yesterday you told them they didn't deserve the same quality of accommodations as their cousin. How do you think that made them feel? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. We didn't mean it like that. How else could you have meant it? She had no answer. As we prepared to leave for the final time, my father made one last desperate attempt. This is a mistake, Natasha. You're letting your pride get in the way of what's best for your children. No, Dad, I replied with quiet conviction. For the first time in a long time, I'm putting what's genuinely best for my children ahead of everything else, including your approval. Oliver and Sophie said stilted goodbyes to their grandparents. I could see they were conflicted, having been taught to respect and love these people who had hurt them so casually. As we drove away for the second and final time, Sophie asked, will we ever see Grandma and Grandpa again? Yes, I assured her. But things will be different. We'll visit on our terms, when we're treated with the respect we deserve. The next few days at Rebecca's house were remarkably peaceful. The twins seemed lighter, joking and playing in ways I hadn't seen in months. I took time off to finalize details for our new home, meeting with the landlord to get keys early so we could move in our belongings before the official lease start date. The house was small but absolutely perfect for us. 3 bedrooms, a tiny backyard where the children could play safely, and a kitchen with enormous windows that filled the space with natural light. It was within our school district, so the twins wouldn't have to change schools, and close enough to the hospital that my commute would actually be shorter than from my parents' house. On Friday, we officially moved into our new home. Rebecca and several other co-workers came to help, turning what could have been a stressful day into something that felt like a genuine celebration. By evening, the beds were assembled, the kitchen was functional, and the living room had enough furniture for us to sit together comfortably. That night, after we had ordered pizza and the twins had gone to bed in their own rooms for the first time in nearly 2 years, I sat alone in my new living room and finally allowed myself to cry. Not from sadness, though there was some of that, but from relief and a bittersweet sense of accomplishment. My phone had been buzzing with messages from my parents all day, ranging from angry accusations to tearful pleas to come home. I had responded only once, letting them know we were safe and settled and that I would contact them when I was ready to discuss our relationship further. The following Monday, my parents showed up unannounced at our new house. I had just returned from dropping the twins at school and was preparing to leave for my shift. "How did you find our address?" I asked as I reluctantly invited them inside. "Your Aunt Patricia told us," my father admitted. "She thought we should try to reconcile." I made them coffee, watching as they surveyed our modest but comfortable new home. "It's smaller than I expected," my mother commented. "It's perfect for the 3 of us," I replied without defensiveness. "Natasha, we want you to come home," my father said, getting straight to the point. "This has gone on long enough." "This is our home now," I said firmly. "But the children need their grandparents," my mother insisted. "And their uncle and cousin. What they need is to be treated with consistent respect and love," I countered. "When you can provide that consistently, you're welcome to be part of their lives." "We've always loved them," my mother protested. "Love isn't just a feeling, Mom. It's how you treat people. It's the choices you make that demonstrate what you truly value." They stayed for nearly an hour, cycling through guilt trips, appeals to family unity, and finally grudging acknowledgement that perhaps they had been somewhat insensitive. "We didn't realize how it looked from your perspective," my father conceded. "We just thought we were helping Harrison and Vivian through a difficult transitional period." "And I understand that," I said. "But you helped them at the direct expense of my children's well-being and safety. That's something I simply cannot overlook." When they left, we had reached a tentative understanding. They would respect our new living situation, and we would consider visiting for Sunday dinner in 2 weeks. It was a small step, but it represented progress. Over the following weeks, news of our departure spread through the extended family. Most relatives were supportive, having witnessed the obvious favoritism firsthand at various family gatherings. Aunt Patricia, in particular, became a regular visitor, bringing homemade cookies and genuine interest in the twins' lives and achievements. At work, I received an unexpected opportunity, a promotion to charge nurse on the pediatric floor with a significant salary increase. The hours would be more regular, with fewer overnight shifts, giving me substantially more time with Oliver and Sophie. Meanwhile, I heard through the family network that Harrison and Vivian were experiencing significant difficulties. Without me there to help with household responsibilities and emergency childcare, they were finding it challenging to manage their own responsibilities effectively. My mother, now in her 60s, was exhausted from trying to keep up with an active baby while also maintaining the house without my daily assistance. When we did attend that first Sunday dinner 2 weeks later, the atmosphere was strained but civil. Harrison and Vivian were notably less smug and entitled, perhaps finally realizing that my presence had actually made their lives easier in ways they had completely taken for granted. Most importantly, Oliver and Sophie were demonstrably happier than I had seen them in years. Oliver's teacher reported that his focus and participation had improved dramatically, and Sophie was thriving in her clarinet lessons, practicing daily in her own room without fear of being shushed or criticized for pursuing her passion. One evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she said something that confirmed I had made the absolutely right decision. "I like our house, Mom," she said sleepily. "I feel like I can actually breathe here." Of all the validation I could have received, my daughter's simple statement meant the most. We had created a home where my children could breathe freely, both literally and figuratively, and that was worth everything we had endured to get here. 6 months after our dramatic departure from my parents' home, our lives had transformed in ways I could scarcely have imagined. Our small rental house had become a true home, filled with laughter, artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator, and the comfortable chaos of authentic family life. Oliver and Sophie had absolutely blossomed, their natural confidence returning as they settled into an environment where they were genuinely valued and respected. My promotion to charge nurse had brought not only a better schedule and increased salary, but also new professional responsibilities that challenged and fulfilled me in unexpected ways. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was truly thriving rather than merely surviving from crisis to crisis. Our relationship with my parents evolved into something cautiously cordial. The Sunday dinners became a monthly tradition, with clear boundaries established and mostly respected. My mother slowly began to acknowledge the systematic favoritism that had pervaded our family dynamics, though my father still struggled to see his role in what had happened. "I've been thinking a lot about last fall," my mother said during one of her visits to our home. She had started coming by occasionally on her own, without my father's dominating presence. "I didn't realize how much we were hurting Oliver and Sophie with our behavior." "What made you finally see it?" I asked, genuinely curious about her evolution. She sighed, looking older than her years. "After you left, nothing was the same. Harrison and Vivian stayed for another month, but without you there managing everything, I was completely overwhelmed trying to maintain the house and help with Camden. I started to realize how much you had been contributing, how much I had been taking you completely for granted. It was the closest thing to an apology I had received, and I accepted it as such. And then," she continued, "Harrison and Vivian started arguing constantly about childcare, about the renovation that never seemed to progress, about financial responsibilities. They moved back to their house before Christmas, even though the construction work wasn't finished." I wasn't surprised. Harrison and Vivian had always presented a united front in public, but I had glimpsed cracks in their relationship foundation. Without the buffer of my parents' constant approval and my practical daily support, those cracks had apparently widened into genuine problems. "How are they doing now?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine concern. "They're in couples counseling," my mother admitted. "Your father thinks it's complete nonsense, but I think it might actually help them. Vivian went back to work full-time, and they're struggling significantly with childcare arrangements." I nodded, feeling a brief twinge of sympathy despite everything. Parenting was challenging under the best circumstances, and their relationship had never seemed built on the strongest emotional foundation. The most significant change, however, was in my children themselves. Oliver's anxiety had virtually disappeared, and his natural creativity had re-emerged with stunning force. He had joined an after-school art program and was thriving under the mentorship of a patient teacher who recognized and nurtured his genuine talent. Sophie had made the advanced band at school and was seriously considering trying out for the soccer team in the spring, finally able to pursue both her passions without constant criticism or dismissal. One evening, as we sat together working on a complex puzzle, a quiet family ritual we had established in our new home, Sophie broached the subject of her grandparents with characteristic directness. "Mom, why do you think Grandma and Grandpa treated us so differently than Camden?" she asked carefully, fitting a challenging piece into place. I considered my response thoughtfully. "I think people sometimes develop fixed ideas about others that make it difficult for them to see situations clearly. Grandma and Grandpa always viewed Uncle Harrison as special and deserving of extra attention. When he had Camden, they transferred those same feelings to him automatically. But we're their grandchildren too, Oliver pointed out with simple logic. Yes, you absolutely are, I agreed. And they do love you genuinely. They just didn't know how to show it equally or fairly. Is that why we left? Sophie asked. Because they weren't being fair. We left because everyone deserves to be treated with respect and kindness, I explained. When that wasn't happening consistently, we needed to create our own space where we could all thrive. Oliver nodded thoughtfully. I like it better here anyway. At Grandma and Grandpa's house, I always felt like I was in the way of something important. You are never in the way here, I assured him with complete conviction. This is your home, and you belong here exactly as you are. The conversation shifted to other topics, but I was struck by how maturely they were processing what had happened to our family. Children were remarkably resilient when given safety, consistency, and honest communication. In April, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A small 3-bedroom house in our neighborhood went up for sale, priced just within my financial reach thanks to my promotion and careful saving over the past months. After consulting with a mortgage broker and thoroughly reviewing my finances, I made an offer that stretched my budget but felt manageable. To my surprise and absolute delight, it was accepted. Becoming a homeowner had been a distant dream when we left my parents' house, something I hoped for in some nebulous future. Now, less than a year later, it was becoming reality. The house needed some cosmetic updates, but was structurally sound and in an excellent location. Most importantly, it would be completely ours. When I shared the news with the twins, their excitement was absolutely contagious. They immediately began planning how they would decorate their individual rooms, what color we should paint the front door, where we would plant a garden in the small backyard. Can we get a dog once we move in? Oliver asked hopefully. We'll see, I replied, not ready to commit immediately but warming to the idea. A dog would complete our little family in many meaningful ways. The process of buying the house brought my father back into our lives in an unexpected way. Despite our still strained relationship, he had extensive experience with home buying and offered to review the inspection report with me. The roof has at least 5 years left, he said as we sat at my kitchen table reviewing the technical documents. But you'll want to budget for replacing the water heater sooner rather than later. His practical advice was genuinely helpful, and I appreciated that he was making an effort to support me without attempting to control or criticize my decisions. It represented a small but significant shift in our dynamic. I'm proud of you, Natasha, he said unexpectedly as he was preparing to leave. Buying a house independently is no small accomplishment. The words I had longed to hear for most of my life caught me completely off guard. Thank you, Dad, I managed to reply. I know I haven't always been fair, he continued haltingly. Your mother and I have been discussing extensively how we handled things. I can't change the past, but I would like to do better going forward. It wasn't a complete apology, but coming from my proud, stubborn father, it felt monumental. I would like that too, I told him honestly. The day we closed on the house, Oliver and Sophie were in school. I signed the papers alone but took a photo of the keys to show them when they returned home. As I stood in the empty living room of our new house, my house, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. 2 years ago, I had been a newly divorced mother, uncertain about my future and dependent on my parents' conditional support. Now, I was a homeowner, advancing professionally, and most importantly, providing my children with the stable, loving home they truly deserved. The journey had been painful at times, forcing me to confront difficult truths about my family and myself. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but absolutely necessary, that standing up for my children sometimes meant walking away from toxic situations, and that my worth wasn't determined by others' perceptions or approval. We moved into our new home on a sunny Saturday in May, with help from friends, colleagues, and yes, even my parents. The atmosphere was celebratory as we arranged furniture, unpacked boxes, and ordered pizza for everyone who had helped make this transition possible. By evening, when only my parents remained, we sat together on my new back porch, watching Oliver and Sophie explore their yard with unbridled joy. This is a good home, my mother said quietly. You've done exceptionally well, Natasha. Thank you, I replied, accepting the compliment without qualification or doubt. As the sun set on our first day in our new home, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain of that October day, when my children had been deemed less worthy than their cousin, had transformed into the catalyst for positive change. Sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most necessary departures. What had seemed like an ending, the day we packed our bags and left my parents' house, had actually been a beginning. A beginning of self-respect, of true independence, of showing my children what it meant to stand up for yourself and for those you love unconditionally. Family, I had learned, wasn't just about blood relations or obligation. It was about mutual respect, consistent kindness, and the choice to value each person for who they truly were. My children and I had created our own family unit, strong and supportive, and we had opened our circle to include those who treated us with the dignity and respect we deserved. As I tucked the twins into bed that night in their very own rooms, in our very own house, I felt a deep sense of peace that had been missing from my life for years. We had weathered the storm and found ourselves on solid ground at last. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your family's well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of overcoming family challenges and finding the courage to choose yourself. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pack your bags and create the life you and your children truly deserve. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to stand up for what's right, especially when it's difficult. Sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who teach you that you're stronger than you ever imagined.